Hello everyone, why do we talk about prophecy today? Why do we bring ancient scripture into the complexities of modern warfare, politics, and diplomacy? Because patterns matter. Because history has a voice, and because when the past starts to look like the present, wise people pay attention. We are watching something unfold in real time. A tension between nations. Israel and Iran, that stretches beyond borders, beyond religion, beyond politics. And for those who dare to look deeper, it echoes a narrative written thousands of years ago. In the book of Ezekiel, prophecy was spoken, one of nations rising, of alliances forming, of conflict stirring from the north, and of a divine intervention that would change the course of history. Now, I'm not here to preach. I'm here to provoke thought, to challenge us to step back from the noise and ask the deeper question, what does this mean for us as human beings? Because whether or not you believe in prophecy, one thing is clear: conflict exposes character. It exposes purpose. It forces us to decide who we are and what we stand for. Let's talk about Israel. A tiny nation surrounded by hostility, yet resilient. Time and time again, they are forced into a posture of defense, and yet they stand not only with weapons, but with vision, with unity, with an unshakable belief that their existence is not an accident. And then there's Iran, a nation with deep heritage and pride, but whose leadership projects power through fear. They are not evil. They are afraid, and fear, when left unchecked, becomes aggression. This is not just about missiles or borders. This is about why we fight. Because what the prophecy really warned us about wasn't just war. It was alignment, that when people, countries, and ideologies align in the wrong direction, driven by fear, pride, and vengeance, it invites destruction. But when people align around values, truth, and courage and unity, it creates something even more powerful than war change. You see, Ezekiel didn't just talk about enemies. He talked about awakening. He painted a picture of bones rising, of people breathing again, of nations returning to life. So maybe what we're witnessing isn't just the possibility of destruction. Maybe it's the opportunity for resurrection. Here's the big idea. This moment, this tension between Israel and Iran, is not just a headline. It's a mirror. It's showing us what happens when we let history repeat without learning. And it's reminding us that prophecy is not a prediction, it's a call to prepare. Prepare to lead with purpose. Prepare to question what we're aligning with. Prepare to be people of peace in a time that demands courage. If the Ezekiel prophecy is happening now, then we are not just spectators, we are participants. And the future is not written in stone. It's shaped by those who dare to live by values, not vengeance. So, I ask you, what side of history will you stand on? Not polagraphically, but morally, spiritually, humanly. Because history doesn't just remember the powerful, it remembers the purposeful. Let's be those people. When we look at what's happening in the world today, tensions rising between Israel and Iran, alliances forming, warnings being exchanged, it's easy to get caught up in the noise of current events. But to truly understand what's unfolding, we have to take a step back and ask a deeper question: why is this happening now? Why do these specific nations with their unique histories and beliefs seem to collide at this particular point in time? And more intriguingly, why do so many people reference ancient prophecy, specifically from the book of Ezekiel, when talking about modern politics? The truth is, prophecy isn't about predicting the future like a weather forecast. It's about understanding the present with clarity. When Ezekiel wrote of a future time when nations would rise against Israel from the north, he wasn't just trying to scare people. He was revealing patterns of behavior, patterns of fear, patterns of human nature that repeat throughout history unless we choose to change course. And in this way, prophecy becomes less about mysticism and more about insight. It's a tool for reflection, a lens through which we can see more clearly what's going on beneath the surface. Why do we talk about prophecy now? Because the signs are not just in the scriptures, they're in the headlines. Countries aligning in troubling ways, and leaders making decisions that seem to echo ancient warning. More importantly, people across the globe are beginning to ask the same question: are we watching something ancient unfold again, but in modern clothing? That question matters. Not because we want to be afraid of the future, because we need to be prepared to face it. When Simon Sinek talks about starting with why, he's not encouraging curiosity for the sake of it. He's guiding us toward purpose. And that's exactly what this moment demands: a deep, honest look at why these tensions exist, what drives them, and what they reveal about us as a global community. Prophecy, in this context, acts like a compass. It doesn't give us a map with every detail, but it points in a direction. It says, beware when fear leads decision-making, be cautious when vengeance overrides wisdom, and most of all, be alert when people stop listening to history. This is the critical part. We don't study prophecy to predict war, we study it to prevent it. We read these texts not to dramatize current events, but to learn what happens when human pride and fear go unchecked. In that sense, prophecy is a teacher. It's a wake-up call. And the only question is, are we willing to listen? The why behind the Ezekiel prophecy and its connection to today is not about supernatural predictions. It's about human behavior. It's about what happens when we forget the cost of war, when we ignore the wisdom of the past, and when we allow ideology to become more important than humanity. Right now, the world stands at a crossroads. And while some are debating politics or military strategy, others are quietly realizing that this moment was spoken of long ago. Not to frighten us, but to prepare us. Because preparedness isn't just about armies or alliances, it's about mindset, it's about moral clarity. And it starts with asking why. Why is the world watching Israel again? Why are nations gravitating toward conflict? Why does this moment feel both new and ancient at the same time? Because history has patterns, because prophecy holds principles, and because if we ignore the warnings, not from fear, but from wisdom, we risk repeating the very mistakes we were meant to outgrow. So let's not start with fear. Let's not start with politics. Let's start with why. In moments of great tension, when nations stand on the brink of conflict or when ideologies collide, it's not the weapons that speak the loudest, it's the character of the people involved. Conflict doesn't just test strength or strategy, it exposes values. It reveals what truly drives a nation, a leader, a people, and that's exactly what we're witnessing in the current dynamic between Israel and Iran. On the surface, it looks like another geopolitical rivalry, missiles, threats, alliances. But if we look deeper beyond the headlines and the politics, what emerges is a far more human story, a story about identity, fear, resilience, and conviction. This is why it's not enough to ask what's happening. We must ask who is being revealed through this conflict. Because conflict is the great revealer. It strips away the performance and shows us what lies beneath. Take Israel, for example. Surrounded by hostility, limited in size and resources, yet somehow has remained not just alive, but vibrant. Time after time, it has faced existential threats and yet endures. Why? Not because of superior firepower or global favoritism, but because of a collective identity rooted in something deeper than politics. Israel's survival is tethered to purpose. Its people are taught from a young age about their history, their suffering, their journey. There's a deep-rooted belief that their presence in the land is not random. It's part of a much larger story. And it's that belief that creates unity. That's what fuels their courage, not arrogance, not aggression, but purpose. Now look at Iran, a country with an incredibly rich and ancient culture, a land of poets, scholars, and philosophers. But its current leadership, it operates from a place of fear. The desire to project dominance in the region is less about confidence and more about insecurity. The aggressive posturing toward Israel, the nuclear ambitions, the alliances with other adversaries, they are signs of a regime desperately trying to assert control in a world where its legitimacy is constantly challenged from within and without. It's important to say this: the Iranian people are not the enemy. In fact, many of them are victims of the same fear-driven leadership that provokes international tension. The conflict between Israel and Iran is not simply a clash of nations. It is a clash between conviction and control, between clarity and chaos, between identity and insecurity. And this is the larger point. When people or nations go to war, they reveal their motives. When pressure mounts, true intentions come to light. Israel doesn't want war. It wants peace, but not at the cost of its survival. Iran's leadership, on the other hand, speaks of resistance and liberation, but acts that perpetuate fear both within its borders and beyond. This is where prophecy becomes more than spiritual symbolism. The Ezekiel prophecy described nations gathering against Israel. But what many miss is that the prophecy also implicitly reveals motives. It speaks to the spirit of the age. And today, that spirit is once again being laid bare through conflict. So what does this mean for us? It means we must learn to read conflict not just as confrontation, but as communication. When leaders speak, when nations move troops or fire missiles, they are telling us something about what they believe, about themselves, their people, and their future. And our job is to listen carefully, not to the noise, but to the truth beneath it. Conflict exposes character, not just of governments, but of people. It forces us to decide what we align with, what we stand for, and what kind of future we're willing to fight for, not with weapons, but with wisdom. That is the real battle. And it's happening now.
When we talk about prophecy, especially one as profound as Ezekiel's, we often get caught up in the dramatic visuals: armies marching, wars breaking out, nations rising against nations. But if we stop there, we miss the deeper message. Ezekiel's prophecy isn't just about impending doom, it's about alignment, about how certain ideas, values, and intentions begin to gravitate toward one another, either for the sake of destruction or for the possibility of redemption. Look at the modern world. Specifically, look at the growing alignment between Iran and certain regional powers who oppose Israel not merely on political grounds, but ideological ones. It's not just about borders or treaties, it's about belief systems colliding. What we're seeing is the fulfillment of an ancient pattern Ezekiel warned us about, a time when nations would unite around hostility rather than hope, when people would choose vengeance over vision. That's alignment in the wrong direction. Alignment is a powerful force. When people come together around values like justice, dignity, and compassion, alignment can heal nations. But when alliances are formed around fear, hate, or domination, alignment becomes dangerous. And it doesn't just affect governments. It affects the soul of humanity. In Ezekiel's vision, the coalition that rises against Israel isn't random. It's intentional. It's made up of nations with their own agendas, but united by a common enemy. This is not far from what we're seeing today. Certain regimes, driven by ideology and ambition, are joining forces under the banner of resistance against Israel. But beneath the slogans and speeches lies a dangerous truth. They are not united by purpose, they are united by anger. And here's where we need to pay close attention. Because alignment doesn't just happen between governments. It happens inside of us. Every time we're faced with tension or injustice, we're given a choice. Will we align with truth or with the crowd? Will we anchor ourselves in wisdom or drift toward reaction? That's the personal application of Ezekiel's prophecy. It's not just about ancient armies, it's about modern mindsets. It's about how quickly people can be pulled into groupthink, outrage, and polarization, and how easily that can spiral into conflict. The prophecy is not about predicting war, it's about revealing what causes it. The most dangerous thing about wrong alignment is that it often feels right in the moment. When you're afraid, angry, or hurt, it's easy to rally around those who speak the loudest, even if they speak with hate. It feels like unity, but it's actually manipulation. That's what Ezekiel was warning us about. Not just armies on the march, but hearts on the move, drifting in the wrong direction. So what's the solution? It's not to isolate, it's to realign with values that build instead of break. Align with leaders who serve rather than dominate. Align with people and principles that promote life, not conflict. Because history has shown us again and again that when the wrong forces align, destruction follows. But when the right ones come together, transformation is possible. We often think prophecy is something that just happens to us. But in truth, prophecy is a mirror. It shows us what could happen if we don't change course. It's a warning sign on the highway, not the crash itself. Right now, the alignments forming across the world are more than political. They're moral. And it's up to us to pay attention. Because whether we're leaders of nations or just people trying to do what's right, we are always aligning with something, with someone. The question is, are we aligning with fear or with hope? Because that decision, made in small moments by millions of people, determines whether prophecy becomes tragedy or triumph. There's something powerful about patterns, especially when they repeat. And history is full of them. Nations rise, nations fall. Empires expand, then collapse. Peace treaties are signed only to be broken. It's easy to look at these patterns as inevitable, but they are not. They are consequences. They are what happens when we, as people and as societies, fail to listen, not just to each other, but to history itself. That's what makes the Ezekiel prophecy so important in our time, because it's not just a religious text or a vision from long ago. It's a pattern, and what's happening right now between Israel and Iran is a chilling echo of that pattern. The alignments, the rhetoric, the threats, they're all starting to sound like something we've heard before. And that should make us pause, not panic, not react, but reflect. Ezekiel spoke of a time when nations would gather with hostile intent toward Israel, forming coalitions that moved not only with military power, but with spiritual blindness. The prophecy describes leaders so consumed with their mission that they lose sight of wisdom. They lose sight of humanity. And if we look closely at today's world, it's not hard to see that same spirit rising again. But the point is not to look at the prophecy and say, "See, we're doomed." That's not what Ezekiel intended. Prophets don't speak to terrify, they speak to warn, to prepare, to help us recognize the signs and make a different choice. Because when history starts to sound familiar, that's not fate knocking at the door, it's a second chance to change. The problem is, most people don't listen to history. We treat it like background noise. We're too consumed with the urgency of the now, our politics, our struggles, our fears, to look back and learn. But here's the truth. If we refuse to listen to the past, we are inviting it to repeat, and the consequences will always be heavier the second time around. In Ezekiel's time, the warning was clear. Don't ignore what's coming, or you will be caught unprepared. And the same principle applies now. The rising tensions between Israel and Iran are not just geopolitical moves. They are part of a larger human story. One that's been told before, one that ended in conflict, in devastation, in loss. And unless we stop and truly ask ourselves what we're aligning with and why, We may see history run its full course again, but it doesn't have to be that way. Prophecy isn't a cage, it's a compass. It points toward danger, yes, but it also points us toward the right path, toward peace, toward understanding, toward better choices. The future is not set in stone. It is still being written by the decisions we make right now. We must learn to listen, not just to politicians or media outlets, but to the lessons of history, to the moments when conflict could have been avoided, but pride got in the way, to the alliances that seemed wise in the moment, but led to catastrophe, to the times when fear ruled decisions and the innocent paid the price. Ezekiel wasn't predicting destruction just to say, "I told you so." He was giving people a chance. And that chance still exists for us, for our generation, for the leaders of today, but only if we're willing to pause, to reflect, and most importantly, to listen. So when we hear familiar words, familiar threats, familiar alliances forming, let's not dismiss them as coincidence. Let's recognize them as warnings, as invitations to choose a different path. Because if history is speaking, the most dangerous thing we can do is ignore it. When we talk about prophecy, world events, and the unfolding of global tension, it's easy to feel like spectators, like we're sitting in the audience watching history happen on a stage far from our own lives. The conflict between Israel and Iran, the shifting alliances, the increasing threat of war, these are things happening out there. But the truth is, we are not just observers, we are participants. Whether we like it or not, the future that is being shaped right now will impact all of us. And in small, often unseen ways, we help shape it too. The Ezekiel prophecy isn't merely a script for political leaders and nations. It's a call to awareness for everyone. It's a reminder that we don't need to wear a uniform or sit in a parliament to be part of a global story. We participate in the world with our beliefs, our voices, our choices. We participate with our silence and with our speech. And in moments like these, neutrality is an illusion. Doing nothing is still doing something. Choosing to ignore what's happening is still a choice, one with consequences. When Simon Sinek talks about leadership, he often emphasizes that leadership isn't a rank, it's a behavior, and that's what applies here. You don't need to lead a nation to have an impact. You just need to lead yourself. In times of tension, in moments of uncertainty, the world needs people who live with integrity, people who choose wisdom over reaction, peace over provocation, clarity over confusion. So, how do we participate in this larger narrative? How do we take part in what the Ezekiel prophecy reflects? Not by fueling conflict, but by shifting the culture around us. First, we must pay attention. Awareness is the first step toward meaningful participation. Too many people are sleepwalking through history, consuming headlines without questioning them, adopting opinions without understanding their roots. When we start paying closer attention, not just to events, but to the values behind those events, we position ourselves as responsible citizens of this world. Second, we must choose alignment. As the prophecy warns, alignment matters. There are people and movements driven by fear, hatred, and vengeance. And then there are those driven by peace, justice, and truth. The choice of who we support, whether through conversation, influence, or even internal belief, has ripple effects. When enough individuals align with integrity, it shifts the atmosphere. It affects what leaders can justify. It changes what cultures tolerate. Third, we must speak up. This doesn't always mean standing at a podium or posting on social media. It means speaking truth in our own circles. It means challenging hate when we see it. It means educating ourselves and others. It means refusing to be passive in the face of growing division. Our silence, especially in moral crises, can be more damaging than our words. Fourth, we must act with courage. Courage doesn't always look like heroism. Sometimes it's just choosing not to be cynical. Sometimes it's refusing to stereotype an entire nation or religion. Sometimes it's listening when it's easier to argue. Every act of courage, no matter how small, contributes to peace. The point is, this prophecy, this moment in history, isn't just happening to us. It's happening with us. And if we forget that, we risk becoming complicit in cycles of destruction simply by doing nothing. The future is not some distant timeline we'll arrive at. It's something we're all helping to create moment by moment, whether we choose fear or faith, conflict or compassion, silence or truth. That choice is participation. So the next time someone tells you that what's happening between Israel and Iran is out of your hands, remember this: you're not just a spectator, you're a participant, and your choices matter. There's a common misconception that prophecy is about fate, that it lays out a fixed future we have no power to change. But that's not the message of Ezekiel, and it's not the message of history. If anything, the purpose of prophecy is not to trap us in inevitability, but to wake us up to possibility. The future is not written in stone. It's shaped moment by moment by the people who are willing to live with intention and lead with purpose. That is the real power behind the Ezekiel prophecy. It doesn't just warn us of what might happen. It challenges us to ask, what are we going to do about it? Right now, the world is in a fragile state. Tensions between Israel and Iran are rising. Alliances are forming that mirror the very patterns described in the prophecy. Fear is growing, uncertainty is spreading, and many people feel helpless. But the truth is, the future doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to the purposeful, to the ones who decide to respond instead of react, to those who choose values over violence, clarity over chaos, peace over panic. You see, destruction is never the final word unless we let it be. Prophecies of war, unrest, and conflict are not final judgments. They are opportunities to pivot, warnings meant to stir our conscience and awaken our moral imagination. And in that way, the Ezekiel prophecy is not a curse, it's a gift. It invites us to see where things are headed and ask ourselves, is that really the path we want to stay on? It's easy to point fingers at governments, politicians, and world leaders. But true change doesn't start at the top. It starts with people, ordinary people, who are willing to take responsibility for the culture around them. It starts with conversations, with courage, with refusing to normalize hate, with resisting the temptation to dehumanize those we disagree with. It starts when we decide that purpose is more powerful than pride. Think about what Ezekiel saw: not just a warning of nations gathering against Israel, but also a vision of dry bones coming to life, of people standing again, of breath entering those who were once broken. That's not just symbolic, that's transformational. It tells us that even in the darkest moments there is still hope, that life can still emerge from conflict, that peace can still be born from the ruins of war. But it takes people who are willing to see beyond the immediate, people who understand that prophecy is not about knowing the future, it's about shaping it. And shaping the future requires vision, patience, and most of all, purpose. Because when people live with purpose, they create ripples. They influence families, workplaces, communities, and enough ripples create a wave. This is not the time to sit back. It's not the time to be passive or paralyzed. It's the time to lead, not necessarily on a grand stage, but in our daily lives, by showing kindness when it's unpopular, by standing for truth when it's inconvenient, by choosing peace even when the world around us leans toward conflict. Ezekiel's message was never meant to scare, it was meant to prepare, and if we take it seriously, we'll realize that prophecy doesn't end with destruction. It ends with awakening, with renewal, with people who decide that they will not be ruled by fear. The future is open. It's waiting to be written, and it will not be written by those with the loudest voices, but by those with the clearest purpose. So let's be those people. Let's shape the future with intention, with courage, and with the unwavering belief that peace is still possible, if we are willing to pursue it, live it, and lead it.